It's time for another episode of App Stories. I'm John Voorhees, and with me, of course, is Federico Viticci. Hi, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
Very good, very good. We've got great sponsors this week. We've got Pillow, Instabug, and Wealthfront. You'll be hearing more about those as the show goes on. Federico, let's talk a little bit about what's happening in Ukraine, because last week when we recorded, as people probably know who listen to this regularly, we recorded in advance. And when we recorded Monday's episode, not much had happened yet in Ukraine, but obviously Russia has invaded. And there's been a lot of human tragedy in the country. There have been a lot of refugees, over 1 million people who have, as we record now, have fled the country. And a lot of people have been killed. A lot of terrible things are happening. And we wanted to just remind people that Federico had tweeted a few days ago some links to ways you can help. Because one of the things that, Federico and I, over the years, have gotten to know an awful lot of people from Ukraine. We know developers, we've met readers and listeners. And so it makes it, I think you mentioned this on Connected, it makes it feel more real, I think. And it's so easy sometimes when bad things happen in the world to make it feels like it's far away and it doesn't really impact you necessarily. But the reality is there are people in Ukraine doing the same kind of things that you and I are doing, just trying to get by and run their business and spend time with their family and friends, and their lives have been all turned upside down because of this terrible act of war. And what Federico put together was a tweet with some links that people can use to help out. There's a link to the United Nations Relief Fund, as well as I think it was at UNICEF and the Italian Red Cross, right, Federico?
Yes, I figured that I would include the Italian Red Cross because of all the Italian followers that I have still. But yeah, it's hard to talk about this, obviously. It's such a horrible tragedy to the point where, like I was talking about this with Sylvia a few days ago, and I grew up. I'm turning 34 this year, and I've been pretty fortunate in my life. I feel very lucky and honestly privileged by the fact that I never really lived war. Right. The war, it was something that, and I realized this is unfortunately not true for a ton of people listening to App Stories, even before the stuff that has been happening in Ukraine started, right? But war for me was something that I used to read on history books, right?
Right.
And watch on documentaries or something. And to see it happen in real time, to people I personally know and have met in real life, it's horrible and to the point where I feel useless and I don't know what I can say or do or think that could alleviate or do anything remotely useful for those people and for anyone involved. You feel powerless, right? But I also realized because of my privileged position, the very least I can do is donate, to folks, to people who don't have anything anymore. Like there's folks who are, fleeing their houses and they are, relocating to another country. At least, the women and the children and the elderly people are, and everyone else is staying in Ukraine to fight off this invasion. And all this, to talk about this stuff in 2022, it seems absurd, but it's happening. And it's happening to people we know in the Apple community. Because as you mentioned, there's a thriving community of indie developers, of, studios like Riddle, for example, like MacPaw, for example, that have been making Mac and iOS and iPadOS software for decades. And so to see it happen to people we know and to feel powerless, it's a horrible feeling. And so I felt like maybe the least we can do is to summon, the resources that we can donate, whether it's money, whether it's food, it's clothes, and donate that. At the very least, that's what we can do. Obviously, we are not politicians. We are not world leaders. We are regular people witnessing on social media and the news and, on the internet what's happening. So if you can, spare, anything works, €5, $5, €50, $100, it doesn't matter. Some clothes, some food. I'm sure there's your local government may be collecting resources that they are sending off to Ukraine right now. I know it's happening in Rome. I know it's happening in Viterbo, my hometown. So if you can, please consider a donation. Please consider checking out, software made in Ukraine by the folks that we just mentioned. We're going to put a few links in the show notes. It's horrible what's happening, but at the very least, we are lucky, we are privileged to be able to talk about this even. But at the same time, I feel like we should be doing something. And
right.
So that's sort of how I'm approaching this.
Yep, agreed. All right, Federico, why don't we dig into today's topic? And what I wanted to talk about...
So this is a very particular topic that I want you to explain to me. Because I feel like in this case, you are the professional user for a bunch of things that you're going to cover today. I'm the student here in many ways.
I call this beyond doom scrolling.
Okay.
All right.
Is this your name of your class?
Yes. This class is Beyond Doom Scrolling, How to Get More Out of Twitter. And the thing that has driven me towards this, and I suppose we ought to talk a little bit about our relationship with Twitter over the years and where it stands today. And my relationship with Twitter as a service is vastly different today than it was when I signed up back in whatever it was, I think 2007. And this gets talked about a lot. Twitter used to be a lot more fun. It was more of a water cooler. It was a place to just hang out and chat with other tech nerds.
But by the way, have you ever hung out at an actual water cooler?
No, I haven't. I know people say that all the time. I've seen a water cooler, but I have never actually hung out at a water cooler.
But have you seen the hangout at the power cooler?
No,
at the water cooler.
I can't say that I have, Federico. Sorry. This is not an American thing, I don't think. Maybe they do it in Italy too.
Do they? I don't know.
In any event.
Yeah.
In any event. It has changed a lot. And my relationship has changed with it too. I mean, it's more of a business tool for me now than anything else. It is part of both a way to find ideas for writing, leads for selling advertising, ways to promote the things we do at Mac Stories. And that's an awful big part of what I do on Twitter now. And we're going to talk about things like managing multiple accounts and so forth, because we obviously have accounts for the site and for the club and for this show and so forth. And you and I both use those, and it can be at times a lot to juggle. And I wanted to, what it's really come down to for me, though, is beyond just kind of those Mac Stories related tasks that are kind of businessy. It's become a research tool and a way to get feedback from people. I think it's a good avenue for getting feedback from both readers and listeners. So I thought we'd dive in and I could talk about each of those categories and give some tips. But how has your relationship with Twitter changed, Federico?
It changed a bunch over the years, but the one thing that has stayed true, I think, is it remains for me an excellent way to discover cool things, to discover articles, links, news, apps, videos. I don't do as much personal time, if you will, let's call it that. Like I don't do a lot of personal opinion sharing anymore. I used to be much more public about all kinds of thoughts before. Now I mostly use it for work and video games and posting silly memes and stuff.
Yeah.
I do find it especially useful as a way to collect feedback from people, but not just feedback like, hey, I like this article, or hey, you have a typo in this paragraph. In the sense that, like, so many times in my articles, I leave like links to my Twitter profile, and I say things like, if you're also using this shortcut, please let me know, or stuff like that. So to direct people to my Twitter account as a way to tell me, like, are you also using this app, or are you also, using the shortcut? Have you done something cool with this accessory that I should be familiar with? So as a way to engage with people in a very specific sort of topic, that is super useful to me. What I don't do is I have tried to, because I get my news, I have a pretty diverse news diet these days.
Mm-hmm.
I subscribe to a handful of American newspapers as well as a couple of Italian ones. I don't really want to get too much doom scrolling material in my Twitter timeline. So I've been trying to turn my timeline into a more useful tool, more than a diverse tool, if that counts. Because I never feel like you can get enough context out of opinions fired off into 180 characters. And I prefer to read actual articles online. So I've been trying to make my Twitter a more, a less dreadful place by, following people for like in the Apple community, in the video game community, retro gaming, Pokemon, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I think we have similar timelines to each other in a sense, because I do have like some things like CNN in my timeline, but for the most part, I don't get like my world news from Twitter. I mean, it's nice to be able to see breaking headlines, and that's why I have like CNN in there. But if I want to get world news, that sort of thing, I'll go somewhere else. I do follow publications that are related to things like video games or music or the Apple community there too. But even those, I mean, I still, especially when it comes to tech, I generally don't subscribe I don't follow a lot of the Apple websites because I get most of that from RSS. Instead, I tend to follow the writers because there are particular writers whose work that I like. And, I'll even apps, I don't follow a lot of apps, and I'll get to this in a moment. I use lists for that. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can improve your health and well-being in more ways than you can even imagine. Pillow is a simple app that can help you be more aware of your sleep patterns and make informed decisions to improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep, and Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or iPad, you can do that too with the press of a button before going to sleep. If you have an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trends, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session. You can even record sounds like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, or other noises that might be affecting your sleep. If your Apple Watch is a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will also display information about the intensity of sounds during each sleep session and give you a rating of that exposure. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you make informed decisions to improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics with your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down and relax before sleep or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow comes with an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. Naps can help boost your focus, creativity, and overall well-being. If you're working from home, you can also take naps using Pillow's power nap modes. Pillow can wake you up using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. Starting with watchOS 6, Pillow's battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is encrypted and stored on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't need to register or create an account to use Pillow. It can be used totally anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of great features that you can use for free every day. If you want to try Pillow's premium features, there's also an option to start a 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show. First of all, I guess one of the things that I want to emphasize with what I'm suggesting here to get away from doom scrolling is there are a lot of good ways to use Twitter without actually using Twitter, without using a Twitter app. And so I actually try to stay out of Twitter as much as possible and still get the benefits out of it. So that's kind of the overarching theme of all of this stuff. And the first thing that's worth, I think, checking out and thinking about is saved searches. If you have a particular topic that you're interested in, saved searches can be a really good way to dip into those topics without having to see all the other things in your timeline and get distracted by it. Now, saved searches are supported by the official Twitter app, but you have to set them up in the web app right now.
Right. Okay.
Right. So, but Tweetbot, for instance, you can set them up right in that third-party apps. Third-party apps, again, usually have better power user features. So I find it easier to use that, an app like Tweetbot for that. But it supports the Twitter Advanced Search. I guess it's not really an API, but the Twitter Advanced Search syntax, which works really well to be able to narrow your searches both to particular sites if you want, particular accounts on Twitter, as well as search terms. And one of the places that I find this really useful for me is for a very narrow topic. Because the one problem with Twitter is it's such a fire hose that you have to be really careful with what you're searching for, because you'll just get an endless supply of stuff. So what I do is, for instance, when a new version of macOS is announced at WWDC, it always has a new name. And that new name is going to show up in most of those tweets. So I'll just do a saved search for that new version so that over the summers I'm working on the macOS review, I can get that back. I can, see any tweets. Maybe these are people who I'm not following. So that's my first tip, is creating saved searches. And I know you've done a bunch of this for various things yourself.
Yeah, I do the saved searches, but mostly for
monitoring
for me and for Mac Stories. Like, I have the syntax that I actually wrote about on Mac Stories. I think you can probably find the article, and it still works. I do that to find in Tweetbot all tweets, but that also works in the Twitter app, obviously. It's basically a saved search that combines direct mentions as well as tweets that quote one of my tweets. And I did that because the official Twitter app didn't have like this unified mentions view. And I've been using this saved search ever since. I have a similar one for, I have a saved search to catch people who talk about me without mentioning my username directly.
Yes.
People do that. And I like to dip in every once in a while and see what's happening there. And that's also based on a syntax that it's basically looking for tweets that have my last name, but without the @ character in front of it. And it's a saved search with a custom syntax. And that's a very good way to see if anyone is talking behind your back without mentioning you, which is fun sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. Sometimes you don't want to see that stuff either. Yeah. But here's an example of another example of ways you can deal with these searches. Shortcuts is another good way to do this. And what you can do is, if you set up one of these searches and you open it in the Twitter web app and then switch over to the latest tweets view, because I don't know why it defaults to all tweets. I really only ever want to see the latest stuff when it comes to searching. So you flip over to the latest tweets view, and then you copy the URL. You can use an open URL action in Shortcuts and just open directly to that, bypassing your timeline entirely. So, just a good way to kind of bypass the app and get the search results quickly too. The other thing that I use are lists. And I really only use one list these days extensively. And it's a very long list now that is public. And it's just called apps. And it's a combination of, it's mostly developers and app accounts, apps that I've run across that I want to kind of keep an eye on for one reason or another. And it's a really long list. And I don't check it every day, but a lot of times when I have a little downtime, especially on a Saturday morning, I will scroll through that and see what people are working on. And, lists aren't perfect because people aren't stuck in their box of just talking about apps. You'll find developers talking about the basketball game last night and things like that. But concentrating on apps and the people who make apps is a really nice way to get a sense of what's going on in the broader developer community. So I do that pretty frequently. Are you using lists these days, Federico? I know you've made some in the past.
I do have my lists for video games, for Pokemon, for close friends. I made that one myself. There's not like a native close friends feature, but I made a list of my favorite people on Twitter and in real life, and I use that to see what are my friends talking about today. And the video games one is also very very good because it lets me narrow down on a very specific community of users. I should also mention that we just mentioned lists, but Twitter does have a new community feature now.
That's true.
Have you used it at all? Because I haven't.
I have. I've been testing it because I was very curious about it. it's too well hidden. It's, if you see a link, if you see a community pop up in your Twitter timeline, and this is only in the official app, and you join, you'll see those tweets. But if you don't join, you can still scroll through and see everything. The problem is getting back to it. There's no good way to do it, right? I mean, someone could take their community that they created and maybe they put a link to it on their website, or maybe they make their announcement, their pinned tweet or something like that, which can help you find your way back to the community if you didn't join right away. But if you didn't, they're very hard to find again. And I have some URLs. Some people in the Club Mac Stories Discord shared some various tech communities, and I've popped in on those periodically to see what they're doing. There's one for HomeKit, and another one that was like developer oriented, and another one that was just general tech. And my sense is they're pretty sleepy places for the most part. I haven't really felt compelled to join any of them, because all the ones that I've checked, even ones that have over 1,000 members in them, don't tend to be very active. Maybe I'm just looking in the wrong place and using the wrong communities, but these were pretty broad categories. Like, as I said, HomeKit, general tech, and developers and things like that. And they're all pretty sleepy places. So I don't think this is, I actually don't think this is going to catch on. And this is one of those experiments that I expect Twitter will eventually abandon.
Like, what's it called? Fleets. Remember Fleets?
Yeah, They were fleeting, weren't they? In more ways than
really
one.
Were.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Instabug. Building mobile apps presents some challenges. Bugs, crashes, and performance issues can be a nightmare for developers. But what if you could not only detect all of these issues, but also get a holistic understanding of the quality of your app from your user's point of view? Instabug's lightweight SDK grabs all of the insights you need to build top quality apps through comprehensive bug and crash reports, performance monitoring, and real-time user feedback, all in one SDK. With Instabug, you can continuously monitor and measure the performance of your app as perceived by your users. Empower your users to report issues and ask questions seamlessly right inside your app. Get all of the information you need about bugs, crashes, and other issues, and get them fixed in record time, all with a focus on privacy and security. And you don't need to worry about the hassles of switching to a new tool. It only takes a minute to integrate Instabug into your app, and it fits right in with your other workflows. With support for Jira, Slack, Trello, GitHub, Zendesk, and over 10 other popular tools. Join over 25,000 top mobile developers around the world who use Instabug to ship high-quality apps. Go to try.instabug.com/appstories so they know you came from the show. Again, that's try.instabug.com/appstories. Our thanks to Instabug for their support of the show.
Here's a question for you. Where do you stand on Twitter during Apple events?
Twitter during Apple events. What do I use because in that?
Yeah, because I have a very... I'm going to go first, but I want to hear from you after. Okay. I don't use it. I find it absolutely useful. Well, okay, no, let me rephrase. During an Apple event, so while the event itself is happening, I don't care about other people's tweets.
Yeah, the hot takes.
I enjoy firing off my own silly, funny, somewhat useful tweets. So basically, I just shout into the void.
Okay.
I find Twitter, though, extremely valuable as soon as the event wraps up. Because the people start digging into the Apple website or the press releases and whatever, and they find all kinds of useful content.
Yeah, this is a source of constant frustration for me, because during the event, you're right, there's not a lot of useful tweets happening. It also is moving very fast, and you're trying to concentrate on the event. So it's very hard to really find a use for Twitter. I have the same problem, though, after the event ends, because I'm writing, and I can't really stop and read hundreds of tweets quickly. So I rely on you to do that, because that's one of the things that you often do after the event is over, is find all those tidbits in part through Twitter. And I wish I had more time. I wish I had a way to manage that and still be able to write relatively quickly. But as we talked about before, we have a town hall at 4:00 my time after the event. The event starts at noon. That gives me roughly 3 hours to write a bunch of stories before the town hall happens, and then I'll do more afterwards. But you want to get the big ones out before you do the town hall, and there's just not time to read Twitter at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why like my advice for Twitter during or after Apple events would be like what I do personally is I keep a note, usually in Craft because I like the rich links, and I just drop in interesting tweets that I find, like details. People take screenshots of like footnotes. They find images of like details of a new iPhone or a new iPad. It is especially valuable after the WWDC keynote because folks tend to find all kinds of features in the betas of the new versions of iOS, right?
Right.
So I struggle with it during the event, but after I will recommend it if if you're into discovering that sort of thing. Another question for you, John, and this is a much broader, like this is for me the sort of the meaty topic of this episode that I want you to explain to me because I feel like I'm still very much an amateur compared to you. Apps to send tweets. So I either use Tweetbot, which is my default client, or when I want to send a tweet and make sure that it's got all the modern Twitter features, like a poll or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
Sometimes I trust the official Twitter more, but I don't have the official Twitter app installed. So what I do is I use the mobile web app, the twitter.com in Safari. Sometimes to send tweets, I use that.
Interesting.
But I think there's a whole world of services and apps that you are using to send tweets.
Yeah, I've tried a lot of different things. And actually, I have everything installed, Federico. Right now, I'm using a combination of Tweetbot, the official app, and a web service called Typefully. So those are the three things I'm using simultaneously. In the past, I've also used Hootsuite and Buffer. And Hootsuite and Buffer are services, I'll start with those, that let you write tweets in advance and schedule them to be tweeted out from an account. And I use that, for instance, when we thank sponsors during the week for Mac Stories or App Stories. Those I set up usually over the weekend, and I set them up for a particular time to be tweeted automatically. Those services are pretty good, but I've really taken a shine to Typefully, which is by the creators of Mailbrew.
Typefully, okay.
Yeah, Typefully. And it's not inexpensive. It's a fairly expensive service if you're using multiple accounts with it. But it's got a fantastic writing UI. And as someone who writes, I really appreciate that because the reality is that I don't want to, it's very easy with Twitter, I think. And I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the small box. I don't know if it's the fat thumbs. I feel like it's very easy to make Twitter typos. And I feel like Typefully has reduced that for me because it allows me to do a couple of different things. There's one mode that is really a focused writing mode. And it's just a really clean, non-distracting UI that lets you write out the words and keep track of whether you're going over the count. But then there's also a UI that lets you see exactly how it's going to look in the official Twitter UI, which with your avatar and with the images attached and all that stuff. And so it's really nice to be able to see just like, oh, how is this going to really like kind of lay out in the app in terms of, am I crunching together too much information, making it too dense and hard to read? Am I spreading it out? It gives you some options to lay it out. That app is fantastic for that. And it also allows you to do things if you're doing promotional stuff, like for our Mac Stories tweets, a lot of times to auto retweet stuff at a particular time. So you can set up the tweet to go out at a particular time and then have a retweet go out at a particular time after that. And
from your own account?
So yeah, from the same account, right? So it just happens like X number of hours later. And I know that that annoys some people when they see those kind of retweets. The reality is, though, that like for the Mac Stories accounts in particular, and some of the promotional stuff we do, is that people read Mac Stories from all over the world.
Oh yeah.
And if I'm tweeting at 3 p.m. in Chicago, someone somewhere in the world who reads the site is in bed asleep. And so it actually is nice that I can have that go back out while I'm asleep and in bed, and they have a chance to see it as well. So it allows you to do things like that. It also has so you can I guess the other writing aspect of it is you can save drafts. Like if you just have the beginning of a thought that you want to tweet, one of the problems I think too with Twitter is that it's so immediate. You're more likely, if you have a half-baked thought, to just tweet the half-baked thought because you don't want to have to try
like
to go
hot takes, basically.
Yes, half-baked hot takes. You don't want to have to go searching for that draft again. I know that the official app has drafts in it and that you can get back to them, but I really like how Typefully handles that and keeps a long list of them in the sidebar that you can revisit and you can delete or finish or revise or whatever and do them later. So that's kind of nice to have available. There are analytics with it too. I'm not like deep into Twitter analytics. I mean, it'll tell you like how many, what's the engagement rate and how many people clicked on, what's the rate of people clicking on your profile and what's the best time to tweet based on the engagement rates and stuff like that. And I'll go in and look at that stuff once in a while. I find it kind of mildly interesting, but I don't really spend a lot of time focused on that. I do find like the best time to tweet thing somewhat interesting, although it feels to me like that's a statistic that you're influencing by the time of day that you just typically tweet anyway. So just because it tells you 7 a.m. is the best time to tweet, it may just be that that's the only time you tweet during the day, not because most people are reading it then. It's just because of the way your pattern of usage. So I don't spend a ton of time on statistics, but those are in the app too. So I've been using that a lot, and I've actually got
it. Does look very nice. I mean, coming from the Mailbrew folks, that's not a surprise.
Yeah, the design is fantastic, and there's a lot of there's some other features that have been added. You can create a personalized page where you can kind of save your best hot takes, and people can go view your hot takes that way, which I have not done. I'm managing in there right now my own account, Mac Stories, Club Mac Stories, and App Stories. I think I've got a plan that lets me add a fifth one to that. But, it's one place where I can go when I put together those tweets for instance, for thanking advertisers. And it's Saturday afternoon, I'm putting those together. I can do the Mac Stories one and the App Stories one at the same time, get them all set up, and then just forget about it. It's very easy to duplicate those tweets if we have one that we're doing twice in a week. And then I don't have to paste it back in. It's just really nice workflow for doing that stuff relatively painlessly and easily. So I've been using that app a lot.
Yeah, I had no idea about the retweet feature, and I think you convinced me. I think I'm gonna give this a go.
I think you should,
especially for for tweets that for like big articles that I'm been working on. Announcements basically.
Yeah, it's good for that kind of thing, and they are working. They have a public roadmap, and they have people voting on features. And one of the things I know that they're thinking about, although I don't know that it's necessarily planned yet, is multi-user access, which would be, for instance, very good for you and I to be able to use, where we could both have like collective access in the same login to the Mac Stories accounts, which would be really nice. That's not possible right now. You'd have to sign up separately. I mean, you could still sign up and use those accounts in a separate Typefully account, I think, but we couldn't like see each other's drafts and work on it. I guess there actually is right now. It's not truly collaborative, but there is a possibility where I can create a draft tweet and send it to you, like send you a link, and you can look at things and comment on them, which is kind of neat. I haven't done that to you yet, but maybe for some big announcement, it could come in handy, because we sometimes collaborate over that kind of stuff through iMessage.
Yeah, it's true.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Wealthfront. A lot of investment apps make it easy to start trading, but just because it's easy to do, that doesn't mean you know what you're doing. Wealthfront makes it easy to invest and easy to grow your savings with a diversified portfolio. You can start investing in no time with Wealthfront's classic portfolio or make it your own with things that you care about, like socially responsible funds, technology, or hundreds of other investments. Wealthfront was designed by financial experts to help you turn your good ideas into great investments without the hassle of doing everything yourself. Don't want to spend hundreds of hours trying to lower your tax bill? They help you do that. Not sure how to rebalance your portfolio or what rebalancing even is? They do it for you automatically. Wealthfront is trusted with over $28 billion in assets, helping nearly 500,000 people build their wealth. And the best part is their product is simple and powerful. It has 4.9.5 stars in the Apple App Store. To start building your wealth and get your first $5,000 managed for free for life, go to wealthfront.com/appstories. That's WEALTHFRONT.com/appstories to start building your wealth. Go to wealthfront.com/appstories to get started today. Our thanks to Wealthfront for their support of the show.
The one utility that I've been using quite frequently over the years to send tweets is the excellent Linky. Linky
Yes.
we have covered on Mac Stories many times before. It's a share sheet extension that simplifies the process of tweeting from one of your multiple accounts from the share sheet itself. It brings up this compose sheet, and what I like about it is that it picks when you're using it in Safari, it automatically detects the title of the page, the link of the page, and even if you have a text selection in Safari, so that you can paste that selection in as text in your tweet, but you can also include it as an image, as a text shot of the quoted selection from the page. And I've been using Linky, but the problem with Linky is that it doesn't support all of the modern Twitter features. And lately, I have been trying to, as much as possible, to include accessible descriptions for my images in my tweets, and I cannot do that from Linky, unfortunately. So that's why I've been using Tweetbot or the Twitter website, because both third-party clients like Tweetbot and, of course, Twitter.com, they let you add like an alt description to an image, which is important for screen readers and folks who use VoiceOver and stuff like that. So Linky is good, but I wish that it supported all of the modern Twitter accessibility things.
Yeah, it hasn't really gotten a major update in a long time. And when you mentioned this in our notes, I got to thinking about this and created a shortcut to kind of replicate this to a degree with Typefully, because Typefully has a URL scheme that you can just add a parameter that is your tweet. At the end, it's URL encoded text, and then what it does, it just kicks you into the Typefully web app with a pre-saved draft. So with my shortcut, what I did is I did a couple of things. I have it basically asks you, and I'll share this with Club Mac Stories members probably this Friday. It asks you whether you're sharing an article, and if you are, it takes, you're in the share sheet. It takes the title and the URL and adds those to the tweet, lets you append some text to it, whatever you want to say, and then kicks you over to Typefully. And then it also grabs the head image from the article and copies it to the clipboard, because there's no way to kind of dump that directly into Typefully, but copies it to the clipboard where you can then paste it into Typefully. And if you're not sharing an article, it just asks you to type in text. And then kicks you over to Typefully. So it's kind of nice that way. Typefully supports alt text, so you can add those descriptions in that app. The app doesn't, you don't have to schedule tweets with it. That's mainly what I do. You can use it as your main Twitter interface for tweeting. It is kind of a nice way if you want to say things on Twitter, but not get sucked into scrolling. Again, kind of being the overarching theme here. I have just tweeted from it because you can do it immediately as well. And when you do an immediate tweet, if you want to set up one of those retweets, you can do it there too. It's really flexible that way. So I've been doing more of my tweeting outside of Twitter. Now, you don't need a service to do that. You can always use something like Shortcuts too, because there are actions and in the Twitter app and Tweetbot and Twitterific to actually tweet out stuff. They have varying degrees of support for the different features, but you can tweet without going to the Twitter app that way as well.
How do you use Twitter on multiple devices? My usage is pretty simple. I have Tweetbot everywhere, even on the Mac, where it's, Tweetbot on the Mac is still the old version 3. Tweetbot 7 still hasn't come to the Mac, but I like the Mac app because of the multi-column view. And I use it on the iPad in multi-column mode, only 2 columns, unfortunately, on iPad. And I have it on my iPhone. And that's all I do. I have Tweetbot everywhere. And occasionally I go to the Twitter website. You, however, John, you send more types of tweets than I do.
Yeah.
Like you tweet from the App Stories account for new episodes, sometimes from the club. And I do that too occasionally. Like, for example, like a few days ago, I tweeted about the town hall for the special event that we're doing. Like I retweet from other accounts, right? So I keep them all configured in Tweetbot. When I need to tweet, I just switch accounts, or I select my account in the Tweet Composer. And one feature that I really like about Tweetbot is that you can long press the retweet icon on a tweet in the timeline, and you can say retweet from. And
that's a great feature.
And you can pick one of your other logged in accounts. So that's something that I do all the time, to like retweet my own tweets from the club or from Mac Stories. So what's your setup like?
So I guess I read Twitter mostly on my iPhone. I don't spend a lot of time in Twitter on my iPad or my Mac, except that on the Mac, it's not that I'm not spending time in Twitter. It's that I'm not, or using Twitter. It's that I'm not reading Twitter on the Mac so much. Usually I have a layout, a multi-column layout on the Mac, which has my timeline visible on the far left, and then 2 other search timelines for searches that, as you mentioned, are monitoring mentions of Mac Stories and Club Mac Stories. So I can kind of see what people are tweeting at those accounts, because I found that I wasn't really paying a lot of attention to the replies and things to those accounts. And good stuff comes into there all the time, and they're not necessarily also tweeting at me directly. So I keep those available, and they're not so high volume that I can't dip in and out a couple of times a day and just catch up. And if someone's asking a question, I can easily answer it whether or not I'm on the tweet or not. So I've been doing that a lot on the Mac. The other thing on the Mac is Typefully, as I already just described at length. That's really, when it comes down to using multiple accounts, I have pretty much gone entirely all in with Typefully for doing the Mac Stories accounts that way, and a little bit of my own account. So when I'm on Twitter on my iPhone, it's mostly just scrolling through my own personal timeline. Like you, I've got those other accounts configured because sometimes that just happens to be the device I'm using, and it's the easiest way to deal with something. But more often than not, I'm just reading from that device.
Got it. Okay. What else should we cover? Maybe notifications. Because we covered reading the timeline, sending tweets, engaging with people. DMs. I mean, I guess DMs is one potential topic. I use DMs a lot. I've always used Twitter DMs a lot. I still do. I DM people in Tweetbot. Sometimes, I don't know why, the DM view in Tweetbot for iPad and only for iPad crashes the app. And I think I keep forgetting to send Tapbots some feedback about this. So I always use the DM view of twitter.com on my iPad. But otherwise, DMs, the private messages, there's nothing revolutionary there.
I don't know how you use that website. It's a terrible website.
I have the Tweaks for Twitter extension installed.
All right. That makes sense. You should explain to people what that is.
It's an extension made by the same developer that makes another Safari extension called Stop the Madness. And it's basically a bunch of settings to disable features on the Twitter website, like features that you don't want to see, like ads, like, sidebars, trending topics, like elements that you don't want to see. It declutters the Twitter website. It's a very good extension.
All right, that's great. That is great. I use DMs. I use them less than I used to. I keep them open, and I do hear from people that way.
I don't anymore. I tried that and stopped doing that.
I don't know. I don't really like getting contacted by people there, only because if it's a Mac Stories related thing, when, for instance, a developer would like to tell me about their app, I'd rather actually get email for that, because DMs are just not very good for kind of getting that information then out again. And it's just another inbox I have to check. And I find that sometimes I just let DMs sit there for a very long time as compared to something like email. I don't know. It's a place that I've just found I've kind of drifted away from. And I suppose part of it is maybe engaging less myself personally with Twitter over time. I mean, one thing I feel like one message people should have is like, you shouldn't feel the need to always respond if someone mentions you on Twitter. Like I certainly don't. I know you don't. I mean, you've got a lot more followers than me, but it's like, I used to feel bad about not answering every single person's question, but our job isn't to be writing on Twitter. It's to be writing on Mac Stories. Yep. And so you can't do that, and you get busy, and you have to let some things go. And that's one of the first things to go. I mean, I also feel very strongly, there's a whole other topic here about what kind of platform is Twitter and what should you use it for? And I think if people listen to the kind of ways I'm using it, they'll have a pretty good idea how I think Twitter is best used. And that is as a promotional and marketing tool, really, at the end of the day. And that I'm not a believer in building any kind of content on top of Twitter's platform, because it's like YouTube. They can take it away just like that.
Oh, yeah. We talked about this before. I'm always in favor of controlling your own destiny. Yes. Controlling your own content, especially. It's my advice. You may disagree with it. Do not trust these platforms to care and respect your content, because they don't. They just see it as, well, the work of art that you just spent, weeks working on. They just see it as user-generated content. They don't care about, you want to make sure that this permalink is going to work forever. Well, we're just going to change it, or maybe we're going to remove this feature. So building original content on top of these platforms, I have always, find myself disagreeing with these trends.
Right.
And yeah, so that would be my advice.
Twitter too is just way too fleeting for that kind of stuff. I feel like, what you find yourself, if you're trying to build content on top of Twitter, what you'll find yourself doing is just tweeting constantly, because everything is just sinking to the bottom of the giant pool of tweets, and that's no good. I mean, I don't know. I just think it's a bad route. Yeah. One thing I should have mentioned when we were talking about safe searches and that sort of thing. Another feature of Tweetbot that I like a lot is you can limit a search to the people you follow. So if you keep a nice tight list of people you're following on a particular topic, that's a nice way to narrow it down, so you're not just getting a bunch of random tweets from whoever about something. It's people that you actually who presumably you're interested in what they have to say because you're already following them. That's a nice way to limit a search. All right, Federico, to close this out, let's just talk about notifications, because there's some new things. I know you wrote about this on Mac Stories, that Tweetbot's latest update has background notifications. What's going on there? How does that work?
So Tweetbot recently added these background notifications for new follows, for people who quote your tweets, as well as from new tweets from specific accounts. Now, these notifications are supported, of course, in the official Twitter app, but they couldn't be supported in Tweetbot before. Now they are, but they are not push notifications. These are based on Apple's background app refresh system, which means that setting needs to be enabled on your device. You got to have background app refresh turned on for Tweetbot. But also, because these are not push notifications that are delivered from a server to your device immediately, they are controlled by Apple. They are controlled by the system that determines behind the scenes how frequently an app should check for changes to something in the background. Meaning, these notifications for new tweets from accounts or from new follows, for example, they're not going to be in real time. They're not going to be immediate. In my tests, it takes from 1 minute to up to 15 minutes for these notifications to be delivered. And that's because Tapbots has no control whatsoever over the timing of these notifications. They can just tell the system, hey, we need to check for data, but then the system is going to throttle Tweetbot anyway, and they don't have any control whatsoever over that frequency. This is one of the features that developers have been asking for on iOS for ages now, especially considering how powerful the latest iPhones and iPads are. I mean, you can probably have real background processes at this time with these chips that we have in these devices. But still, that's not possible. So Tweetbot has these background notifications now, but they're gonna be slower than what you probably want to see.
Yeah, no, I've noticed. I had a similar experience with it. It's pretty good though. I mean, in most cases, with the kind of things that I want to get notifications of, that timing is perfectly fine. I've also used notifications on the official Twitter app. I'm not a big fan of getting floods of notifications, so I'm pretty limited in what I do here. But I do have notifications turned on for all the Mac Stories accounts and for you, Federico, because it's just handy to know what's going on with what you might be tweeting from those accounts or from your own account that's related to Mac Stories, so that I can kind of piggyback and follow on from that without you having to tell me if things are going on. So that's kind of the only really real way that I'm using it. For a while I was using tweet notifications to try to buy a PS5, and that eventually worked, and I turned all those off because it would get really annoying getting all those notifications. But that worked pretty well too. All right, Federico. Hopefully we've gotten some ideas out there for people and ways to use Twitter and get something out of it, whether it's for managing a business or their own personal account, or ways just to kind of keep out of the app when you really don't want to be doom scrolling about the latest happenings in the world. So in any event, we will be back next week. I want to thank our sponsors, Pillow, Instabug, and Wealthfront. You can find me and Federico over at macstories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHN VOORHEES. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.